Wednesday Night Rugby on Off the Ball.
With Vodafone, main sponsor of the Irish rugby team. We all belong to the team of us.
Now then, you're welcome along. Wednesday Night Rugby. We have Rory O'Connor of the Irish Independent here in studio. You're very welcome.
Thanks, Joe.
And Matt Williams is with us in sunny France.
Not too bad, Joe. Hey, Rory, how you doing, mate? Not too bad at all.
Very good. Well, listen, great to have you with us. So I guess we're still reflecting a touch on the URC action from the weekend just gone. In particular, Munster, the slump continues, the poor start of the season continues. Leinster Sharks really delivered on various fronts, and then Ulster continued their good form. They put 47 points on the Ospreys on Saturday night, winning by 30 points in the end. We'll start with the sports ground. We talked to Jerry Thornley and Fiona Hayes about this on Monday. So Connacht 20, Munster 11. The desperation derby, as you coined it. That spread, by the way. That did quite
well. A little bit, yeah.
I'll
take it.
Yeah. Well, I guess it lived up to its billing. Where does this leave Munster is the interesting question. Is this short-term pain, or is it becoming more serious? You're one of the early proponents that this is a more serious situation, I feel.
It's both, I think. I think that this is a good group of coaches who are taking over a group of players that have been playing a certain way for a long time, and they've recognised that way is only going to take them so far, and they're trying to break them down to build them back up. And they're finding that it's more challenging when they're maybe taking the leash off a little bit, and they're finding that or I'm mixing up my metaphors, but they're taking off the stabilisers, and they're finding the kid can't cycle very well, and it's being much more difficult, and they're doing it in an uncompromising environment, because the URC is a much more difficult competition, and particularly for the Irish provinces, because they play against each other more frequently than everyone else. It's a much more difficult tournament now than it used to be. You used to be able to get away with losing 3 or 4 games at the start of the season because it was a long season and you'd get where you were going at the end. You also used to have to qualify for Europe in the same way. Now you have to finish really in the top 6 or 7 if you want to get into the Champions Cup next season, because of the way the thing is set up this year. And so while I do think that these coaches will ultimately get a tune out of these Munster players, it's taking far longer than they really need it to, because they're going to find themselves so far behind the 8 ball. I think they're going to lose. They're going to be in a race for Europe that they can't win, because their games are really difficult. There's very few easy games left in the entire URC campaign, and their confidence levels are shot. I mean, you see them on Friday. I call it the desperation derby, and yeah, you said it stuck, but only one team looked like they got the memo. Connacht looked like they really had their backs against the wall, and they came out fighting. And from minute one, they were physical, they were aggressive. They didn't execute right. If they'd executed right, they would have won that game by 20, 30 points. They were the better team in nearly every aspect of the game. And Munster looked meek by comparison. They looked beaten when they went out, and even when they managed to get themselves into a leading position, partly because Jack Carty had missed kicks, they didn't know how to kick on. And it was Connacht who rejigged their bench and brought on power, and who finished stronger and looked in control for the last 15, 20 minutes of the game. And we've seen Munster, this has not been a vintage decade for Munster, and we've seen low points before, particularly under Anthony Foley, after the Rob Penny era. That first couple of years under Foley didn't go well, and then obviously Erasmus got a bounce, and then Van Gran has been fairly consistently 6 out of 10 pretty much, but Munster expect 8 or 9, but they've dipped again badly now. And it's, they're now in a rut with a really difficult run of games to come. And you just wonder where they're going to find inspiration. The Bulls are coming to town at the weekend. The Bulls are not playing particularly brilliantly at the moment, but they're everything Munster are not in terms of physicality. So that's a really hard game on Saturday. Then it's Leinster at the Aviva. Then it's Ulster, who will be missing internationals, but are still the second best team in this tournament, coming to Thomond Park. Then it's a break to play the Springboks. And then they're into Europe almost pretty much straight away. And that's Toulouse, the best team in France. This season will not get any easier. They've got to get better, and they've got to get it better really quickly.
Matt, what have you made of their performances? You can reference the game just gone. There was Zebre, and then there were the losses in Wales. Just in broad terms, what are we seeing here? Because there can be various theories. Certainly one is this is a coaching ticket, and they've almost given too much information. There's a lot for the players to digest, and that's one of the issues, but there could be several others, I suspect.
There are, mate. Rory's absolutely spot on. There's a lot of change being implemented at Munster, and you have... And I've got to say from first-hand experience, because usually a lot of clubs I was coaching, I was handling them when they were at the bottom, and you had to change a lot to move them forward. And there's a thing called the J curve of change, and that's when you bring in change, performance levels drop in a J shape. They eventually bottom out and they start to come up. But Munster are certainly in that. There's a lot of change and the players are not implementing that change on the field. But there's one other big elephant that people aren't talking about, mate, and I'll bring it out there. Look, the quality of the Munster players for a decade, as Rory has pointed out, has not been good enough. And they're not bad players. Not like I'm not suggesting anyway they're hopeless, but they just don't have the world-class players that they relied on in the past to turn them around. They don't have a Ronan, they don't have a Paul, and they even don't have all these wonderful bit players that they had when they were at their peak, like Keith Earls at his peak and Zebo at their peak. They could turn a game with some individual brilliance. They're just lacking that really brilliant player that can just produce something to spark, use Rory's term again, to get that spark. So this isn't, anyone who lays this just at the coach's feet is wrong. Yeah, sure, there has been great change. There is coaching issues there. They need time to implement that. They're not bad coaches. They're very good coaches, hugely experienced, a lot of quality at other organisations. And Munster expect better. But that doesn't mean, their expectations are right. They're not right. And I've thought Munster were going to have a tough 6 months for a considerable period of time, and I don't wish that on them. I've got great respect for Munster. I would love to see them do better, but I'm not surprised that they are where they are.
So to follow that logic for a second then, and shoot this theory down or just play around with it for a moment. So on the quality of player point of view, I suspect Van Gran and that South African methodology would have been his favoured one, regardless of the calibre of player he had. But is there something maybe in the fact that that's a more simplistic game plan, therefore arguably somewhat lesser players can carry it out, and so now that the team has been asked to do more and to play a more progressive style, a more expansive style, that the wheels are coming off and they may not have the players to do it? Is that part of this story here as well?
There's going to be, you're spot on, Joe, and there's going to be a compromise for the coaches somewhere in that, because, the old story, everyone's got a plan till they get punched. And the coaches have gone in with a plan, and it's a plan that it hasn't just been produced out of thin air. They've obviously thought about it. But when that plan's rubber hits the road, there's been there's a gap in performance. So there's what the coaches were expecting and what the players are producing. There's a gap. Now, one way to get yourself into serious trouble as a coach is to keep saying I'm right and the performances are wrong, because eventually that leads to a very narrow alleyway with a brick wall at the end of it. It's a dead end. You've got to adapt. You've got to change. So, well, this is what I thought we could do, but we're not doing that. We've got to change. We've got to do it. And you've got to do it quick, because exactly what Rory says, there's a number of games under the belt. What a Munster, I've got it written down here, Munster 12th. They've got Europe coming up. They've got a really tough draw of Europe. It's not an easy path forward for this team, and they need to move quickly. I very seriously doubt that they can move quickly enough for this season. I think it's going to be a very difficult year for Munster, because they're running out of runway to take off, and they simply don't have that quality of player that's going to be able to change it. I hope I'm wrong. I hope they come out and smack the Bulls really well. But right now, we can only go on the evidence that we can see, and that's certainly what we're seeing.
I think one thing that will give them a boost this week is the return of the emerging Ireland players, because they've been outside of this bubble for a few weeks and they've actually gone on and enjoyed themselves and won 3 games in a row. And some of the Munster players were some of the best players on tour, including Jack Crowley. John Hodnett's a very, very talented, uncompromising player who can give them some physicality. And Thomas Ahern was one of the best players on that tour. Is a bit of a specimen who gives them something very different, whether it's off the bench. Even last season in their biggest games, they brought him off the bench and he started to really cause teams problems because he's so difficult to play. He's big, fast, strong. He's good in the air. He's got great hands. He was a fullback at one stage and he's 6'6" or 6'7" or whatever he is. Now they're only coming in midweek this week, and it'll be very telling if those players go straight into the team. Sorry, Antoine Frisch is the other one I'm talking about. The centre they signed from Bristol, French born, Irish qualified. Looks like he gives you something very, very different. And even the bit we saw of him playing against Cardiff in the opening game, he looked like he could just give Munster that bit of go forward in the back line that they're missing, that bit of spark that we've been talking about. And then he got whisked off to South Africa, and that's a different topic altogether. But now they're all coming back. They're all coming back confident. They've been in a progressive setup, playing progressive rugby for the last 2 weeks in Bloemfontein. They've been playing at altitude, so they're probably feeling pretty good about themselves fitness wise. Shane Daly's another one who's going to come back. He'll give them experience in the wing. So there is good players who they haven't had access to the last couple of weeks who will be coming in, and I think Frisch talked about this with the media last week, how they've actually had a little meeting in South Africa and said we need to go back and give the rest of this team energy. And that's like, they're like a couple of new signings at a pivotal point in the season, and it is pivotal right now because they need to be picking up. They need to win games they wouldn't necessarily have down as wins, or else they're in a hole because they've lost the games they would have expected to win when they were starting out this year.
And Rory, on Matt's point about quality of player and what kind of quality of game plan they can implement, it's quite an interesting one, because the natural follow question then would be, and I might come to you in a moment, Matt, would be, well, in that case maybe the coaches need to be a bit more reductive, simpler game plan, and just get some wins in the short term and play like a less progressive brand of rugby. But like, to be fair, it's not like they've been playing like the Harlem Globetrotters over the last couple of weeks and stuff's not coming off. I mean, against Zebre they scored 3 pick and jam tries. Like, if they've been trying to play this whirlwind style of rugby and it's just not coming off, then I've missed it.
Yeah,
like it's not even like, oh geez, they won't be able to throw that skip pass anymore. It's not. That's not even what we're seeing.
What's frustrating, I think most people have a bit of patience with this, because we've seen that the Van Graan style, like Erasmus, got them pretty close, but they still got blown away in the semi-final and the Pro, whatever it was, final that year, when it came to it. And then under Van Graan they got the semi-finals, but ultimately that style just couldn't get them over the line. So people want them to change and want them to have an approach that more suits the, I suppose, physical profile of player they have, because they don't have the horses for that course. But what's letting them down is not the style of play. It's the fact they're dropping the ball. It's the fact that they're throwing passes into touch. It's the fact that they're missing tackles, that they're losing the breakdown battle. The breakdown's actually been reasonably good in their first couple of games, but their scrum got beaten up against Connacht. Their line out got taken apart. They missed line kicks.
Scrum was just destroyed against Dragons.
Yeah, this is like it's
breakdown.
Yeah, breakdown. Yes, sorry. Like, these are the basics of the game, and I think at times they look like they're learning their lines, or they've gone into the play but they haven't quite learned their lines, and they're thinking about it all the time.
Yeah,
and like, they haven't been able to get the game plan off the ground. So there's a lot of information there. Yeah. They haven't been able to. They haven't even got to translate it all. They're just gone out into the pitch and they're just puking all over the pitch. You know, it's grim. You know, and the errors that are there are then feeding into this general sense of malaise. And I'm sure the game plan looks amazing, and I've no doubt their training's probably pretty good. But then they're getting out there and they're getting the punch in the face, and it's just throwing them completely off.
So maybe, Matt, to be fair, they are trying to play more progressive rugby, but we're just not getting to see it because the basics are so poor.
Joe, I'd be sitting in your camp there with that, where I can't see too much happening.
Okay.
But the reason I'm saying that, quite often when teams are learning new systems and trying to be in places that they're thinking, where am I supposed to be? And you've got to be where your feet are. You've got to play that ball. And it's exactly what Rory said. What's killing them is not the big system, not the big picture. It's the basics of it. You know, the Dragons game, and the final minutes, the try that the Dragons scored, the winger catches the ball, comes up, there is a red wall in front of him. There's a line. And they simply haven't spoken about who's got who, and he just runs straight through the line. So, you know, that's the detail of what they're trying to do is taking up their mental space rather than just being in the moment. Now, if you compare that to, say, Leinster, who are playing roughly the same system they've played for a number of years, you can see players come in and out. They're very happy to be in that system there. They understand where they're supposed to be, and they get on with playing the absolute detail of the game that wins and loses games at the top end. And Munster are failing at that detail. It's not the big picture that's killing them. It's the minutiae, the detail that's taking them apart.
Another interesting thought. So Dennis Leamy, talking today to the media, he said, we're very conscious of the future, we're very conscious of the present. We've had to pick 45 players in the last 4 games. 5 or 6 of them have been from the academy, and all of which, bar one, was making his debut. It takes time to blood young players. How you manage and create that's very important. I genuinely believe we've a crop of young players here that if we manage them right, they can bring us into the next generation, i.e. 10 years' time. Like, are Munster potentially, Matt, flirting with the idea of like a lost season here, and this will be remembered as the season we blooded our core team for the next generation? And can they afford, will the public, I think, say, well, fair enough?
Great question, Joe. Look, I think what I really encourage the Munster coaches to not do is just that, is to say just that, or to say, we're really proud of the people and we're really doing all those things. Because, to be quite blunt, Munster have been saying that for years and it just doesn't wash anymore. And I really love the Munster hierarchy to come out and be really brutally honest and just say, look, what we're doing is not good enough. We're going to get there. It's going to take time. We just got to keep fighting. We've got good kids here. We're not, but we've got to win now, and we've got to perform now. They don't have to necessarily win now. They've got to perform. Then there's a big difference. You're never going to win every game in this competition, especially in Europe where they are. They've got a really tough couple of games, but if they perform, people will see that, and the people can buy into it. When you don't perform, and as in you drop passes, you miss tackles, you miss all the things you listed out, line out, scrum, all those basics, there's no performance. And that's not good for anyone in the organisation, coaches, players, longevity, or the whole bit. So, a lost season is not good for anyone, because all that does is just pushes that pressure down the line for another 12 months. And that pressure won't go away until you get some sort of performance. Again, not necessarily winning, but performance.
I agree with that, but I think if the young player is in form, he should get the go. And I think too long at Munster, there's been a defined hierarchy where you've got your caps, so you get the nod. And what really frustrated me last year was that Wasps game, when it was unfair on the more established players who went to South Africa and got stuck there. But these kids came in and they were magnificent over in Wasps, and they built something. And then some of them we didn't see again until this season. Some of them we haven't seen since. Pa Campbell comes out this week and gives them the one moment, the magic that they had was his finish, which was phenomenal. He's clearly a confident young man, capable of playing at this level. He started in that game over in Wasps and he was then disappeared. I know he was playing for the Ireland 20s, but he looked ready for senior rugby, and Munster could have, I think, invested more time into him. And he and that batch of young players gave them a real impetus at that moment that felt like Munster were almost reborn that week, and they just squandered it, partly because they just never played the players again. Like Okeke hasn't been, I know he's injured at the moment, but he hasn't been seen since. Like the fans were singing his name. I know he's rough around the edges, but he looked like CJ Stander at times against Wasps that day. And they just, I think what they did was that even afterwards I asked Ian Costello, what do you think these guys could do for the rest of the season? And he said, look, it'll be unfair on the guys and it's a bit of a hierarchy and they have to wait their turn. Well, if they've played well against Wasps, then surely they should be in contention the following week. They've shown they can do it against a good team. They didn't. I think now, if Edogbo, who's looked quite good in the first couple of games, is only 19. If he's playing well, and someone comes back from international camp, well, the guy from international camp should wait his turn because Edogbo's going well. And I think if the young player's going well, it shouldn't be for the sake of it. If the young player's going well, they should be backed, and that will then help them regenerate the whole thing. And you look at Hodnett, I think he's someone who could do it. Ahern is someone who could do it. Ahern's had to wait his turn behind Jean Klein and a few others, more senior guys, and he should have more appearances by now. Yeah.
And to clarify there, young players gave Munster a real impetus, not impotence.
Yes. I've been watching too many ads on BT Sport on a Saturday.
Well, I guess we'll see how they go against Bulls on Saturday at Thomond.
First game at home since April, which wow. You saw what Connacht got out of a home crowd on Friday. I wouldn't say the crowd's going to be huge on Saturday, but being back at home, it should give them something.
Yeah, be interesting to see turnout of that game.
I think there's a real malaise across the board, and people have. This should be a little lift with a new coaching team and all that sort of stuff. But there's a lot of resigned Munster fans out there, and Thomond's hard to get to, and a lot of them live in different counties. They need something. I think that South Africa game in Cork could be really important to them because it's already sold out.
Right.
It's in Páirc Uí Chaoimh. If they get a performance in that game from a bunch of young players without their internationals, that could give them a lift and they could build something from that. But they've 3 big games before then.
Leinster Sharks, man, I know our time is pretty tight here, so everybody effusive about this game for various reasons. I presume you enjoyed it?
Yes, great game. It was really what was needed, wasn't it? Just the closeness of it, the way the Sharks came out. Leinster have got a few problems with their set play defence this year, and I don't know why that's come about, because their set play defence in past years has been excellent, but they've really been caught out a few times. They've been getting very narrow, and the Sharks exploited that. They scored some lovely tries and put Leinster under pressure. But then great character from the team. They fought back, scored some absolutely wonderful tries. Only negative, obviously, was the injury rate. It was a very high attrition game. Really sad for Jordan Lama. From what I hear, he's going to miss the November internationals, because I thought he was really in great form. But, Leinster, they've just got that ability, that belief. It's almost a mirror image of what we just spoke about with Munster. They've got a system, they've got belief. They know if they stick to what they've been coached, it provides points, and they stuck by it and they did it. And it also, I think there's a mirror image to this, Joe. When the South Africans came in last year, I remember talking to you, and because of my experience in Super Rugby, saying I think that South Africans are going to be great for the competition. And for 6 months they weren't. They were duds.
Yeah.
And now you're looking at South Africa going, holy dooly, these guys are pretty good. How are we going to get into the semis? How's a lot of these, the Scots and the Welsh, going to get into the semis? We're talking about where Munster are and this South African tour coming up. And we're just starting to see what division the South Africans are in, and they're in the heavyweight division. And Ireland are in there with them, and they're not going away. They're here for the next few years. And the Sharks, who I think are not a bad team, don't get me wrong, I'm not suggesting, but I don't think they're the best of the South Africans. They came out and put on a display that made for a wonderfully entertaining game with a top Leinster team out in the field. Now, that's not something we could say about the URC or the past editions of the competition that we could say too often about a visiting team coming to the RDS. Far too often they've been one-sided 40-0, 50-0 jobs.
Yeah.
That was a really good game of rugby that the competition needed. There are lots of positives there, mate.
I know you have to run. Thanks so much.
Pleasure, guys. Good to talk to you.
Cheers. Matt Williams there with us. Rory O'Connor of the Irish Independent still here. Loads to take from the game. I guess Matt's broader point jumps to mind. For the first however many months of the South African involvement in this tournament, it didn't really live up to maybe the billing, but we're starting to see now that this could really be the making of this competition, as odd as it's been over the years.
Yeah, and when you think that the Sharks can bring back Ebenezabeth, Bongi Omonambi, Sia Khaleesi, Lekanyo Am, and the winger, his name has just slipped my mind at the moment, but who scored the try in the World Cup final, they are a real threat, and they've picked up an away point in the RDS, which a lot of teams don't do, and they have an Irish coach, and Noel McNamara, who did if he's in the frame for that Leinster senior coach job, did himself no harm at all, because he put together an attacking game plan that caused Leinster no end of problems. I know he has an inside track on all of the players because he had most of them in the academy over the years, but I thought the way they attacked, the intent with which they just don't give a damn about Leinster. They've been playing against the Crusaders, the Auckland Blues for years. Leinster is just another team to them. They're not beaten down by decades or a decade of Leinster winning every game at home. So that's it's really refreshing. And I think everyone who was there, I didn't get to go to the game on Saturday, but everyone I've talked to who was there was just like refreshed by it, because the RDS has become, apart from the odd European game, it's quite boring to go there and watch a game.
Yeah. 18,000. Mapimpi, was it potentially?
Mapimpi, yes.
I know 18,000, because we were even wondering on Monday's shows, like, they don't always get 18,000, they get good crowds, but so everybody clearly knew, we're going to get a game.
Yes.
So I'll make it my business to go
That's more than was at the quarter-final or semi-final last year, when they kind of lost a bit of momentum. And Leo Cullen's been really conscious of the fact that they haven't been selling out games, but that's one of the... I mean, I know they take their biggest games to the Aviva and usually get good crowds. But if you can guarantee more of that at the Aviva, it's going to be good for season ticket sales and all that sort of stuff as well. So, when you think that the Stormers are now on the second longest unbeaten run in URC or Pro 12 history, the Bulls are really hard to play against, really hard to beat, and the Lions, the worst of the teams, just won in Edinburgh on Friday and are going really well. These teams are here to compete and they're here to stay, and for all of the logistical issues that they bring, they have added a lot in a rugby context.
So I'm putting you on the spot here, and be warned, someone's probably going to clip this. Give me your URC power rankings then.
Leinster, Stormers, Ulster, Sharks. I'm probably just reading out the table. Sharks.
Safe way to go.
Benetton have started really well, they're probably below the South African team. So it's probably Leinster, Stormers, Ulster, the 3 other South Africans with the lines at the bottom, then Benetton and Glasgow off the top of my head.
Right.
But that's probably lining up pretty close to the table as it stands. The Welsh teams have started really poorly. They can pick off a win here and there, particularly against an Ulster or a Connacht or the Italian sides, but they're not competitive. I mean, Ospreys were terrible against Ulster on Saturday. You know, that felt like a real Magners League game. You know, or actually Magners League was more competitive. It felt like a Pro 12. You know, late 2000s, the 2019 game. Yeah, it was poor. But the competition, you really just need 1 or 2 box office games a weekend for a competition to kind of to live, to survive and thrive. And when those Irish teams play against those South African teams, it's worth watching.
And do you don't seem to be of the opinion that Munster are going to pierce into that top 4 bubble by the end of this league season? You don't think we'll be saying, well, they're definitely in the pecking order? If I ask you the same question,
I don't think Munster are going to qualify for Europe at this stage. I think Munster will struggle to make the top 8 in this competition, because if you look at their fixture list, and it's really unfair on the Irish teams, they have to play each other twice. No one else has to play the Irish teams twice. They all have to spend 2 weeks. Like Munster's last 2 games of the season are in South Africa. You know, that's when the box will be like. That's when the South Africans were at their strongest last year. They have a really, really difficult fixture list. They need to start winning games, not just pick off games against the Ospreys. You know, they've got one against the Ospreys, I think, but not just one against the ones they've lost to Cardiff. They were their gimmies. That was 8. That's 8 to 12 points they've left behind that they should have got.
Yeah.
And now they're going into games against Leinster where they need to pick up at least 1 point in that game to try and stay alive. They need to be averaging something like 3.4, 3.5 points a game for the rest of the season to get into Europe. And that's where I'm really concerned for them. And I don't know if it'll be a bad thing for them to reset and go into the Challenge Cup next year and really focus on this tournament and have a year where they just don't have this glamour of the Champions Cup, because sometimes it's hidden the deficiencies that happen on a week-to-week basis. The URC is now a competition that's really worth winning. That's worth. You have to be at your best every week, and Munster aren't there yet. So it's going to be a painful year for them.
For this next calendar year, up until the World Cup, there will be scrutiny as ever on Johnny Sexton, given his age. At a certain age, you can go off a cliff. It can just happen, and not least after a summer break. So he took last season's form and he said, no problem.
He looked in flow state, didn't he? That thing that they all look like they're... A few of them did. I thought Robbie Henshaw, the way he set up that try with the cross kick, he just looked like he was operating on a different plane.
He's really peak of his powers now, isn't he? Physically,
he
he's just so robust.
Looks so... Yeah, he looks like he's just... Himself and Sexton looks like time has slowed down. And Ringrose was the same. Ringrose would so well in the wing that he may play himself into an Ireland shirt there if you had your full complement of centres. He certainly looked like he could do a job. There's a bit of a shortage of wings at the moment, a lot of injuries there. He looked really, really comfortable there. But to go back to Sexton, I mean, the way he lived in that game, I know some people are critical of the fact that he went after the referee at times. And look, I've come and go on this, but on Saturday he was... can you imagine he was your captain? You would love it. You've most of those young players that have come in, like Martin Maloney, who came in and at the 11th hour and played really well. Like his entire life, Johnny Sexton has been Leinster star and Ireland star, and now he's playing alongside him, and he's willing to go after the referee for you. He's willing to take on. There was one stage with 4 minutes to go in the game one. He's scrapping with like 5 sharks on his own. I mean, I know if they were losing that game, and we'd probably be talking about, he needs to keep his cool there, and there is a bit of after timing with all of this kind of analysis. But the fact that the fire is burning so bright at the age that he's at, and also the mind is turning, and the body is working at such a level, is so admirable, because I thought he was on the slide about 18 months ago, and he has arrested that completely. Whatever he's put together, I believe he did a training camp in Dubai over the summer, and it just looks like he is putting everything into this, and he's enjoying it as well. It doesn't look like it's a pressure to him, and he's so important. You know, if he goes down, the whole pack of cards that look so strong could go with him. But right now he's looking very, very strong, and we got to enjoy him while he's still there as well. I mean, how many games in the RDS has he got left? He might play in Connacht on the weekend for the final time. This is his lap of honour, but he looks like he wants to take every single last minute out of it.
I suspect he's not of a mind to indulge. This is the last time you play here, and this is the last time you play there, kind of a season.
Hasn't done a lot of media this year, and I'd say that's part of it.
Yeah. Is the problem... I don't know, did he get much criticism for barking at the referee, Craig Evans? Is the issue people have, one, this will turn referees against whichever team he's playing for, and therefore be counterproductive? Or is the issue, two, this is rugby, this is not how we behave? Because if the issue is two, Well, like full steam ahead, Johnny, is what his own
Yeah,
teammates
what
would
was it
say.
Dane Cole said about him during the summer? He's a mouthy so-and-so, or was it November?
Guilty as charged.
I think one of the things the URC has also brought is that it's brought a massive South African audience who are watching this and don't necessarily watch Johnny Sexton on a week-to-week, and they're driving some of the kind of social media because they're quite vociferous on there, and they're, it's easy to hide behind this rugby value stuff when you don't like it. If it was one of their players, they'd probably love it.
Yeah.
He's shown his personality. I don't think there's a sense that he's turning referees on. There was that risk at the start of his captaincy. I think he knows when to push the button and not. And in fairness to him, he was like one of the guy who got red carded. He took off 2 of his players' heads. That's when he lost.
Was not unreasonable.
That's when he lost it.
Yeah.
So I think it's more opposition fans or people who don't watch him on a regular basis going, that's not great.
Like, you'd be quite naive not to pressure a referee. Really?
Yeah. There's ways and means though. Peter O'Mahony's probably a bit more take him to the side and have a chat with him.
Okay.
That kind of Martin Johnson style. Sexton's more confrontational, and it hasn't worked for him all the time. It has, rubbed certain referees up the wrong way. But I think he's modified that. I think he's listened to other people around him. I mean, O'Connell's in his camp at Ireland. Leo Cullen was a great captain, is his coach. So I'm sure he's taken advice on it. But the fire that he brings and the personality, like we want, you talk about the Ireland footballers last night in Amber Barrett's interview, the authenticity of her personality. We get enough robots in rugby. We get enough poor interviews. We get enough guys just saying what they think we want to hear. Seeing Sexton behave the way he does and being true to himself is very enjoyable, and I think we'll really miss him when he's gone because there's not many Johnny Sextons around the game.
He's a sneakily good interview as well because he's not immediately jazz hands and high energy sometimes, but he's always saying something.
Yeah, when you get him, and like his press conference is the best chance you get at the moment from my point of view is an Ireland press conference, and you just have to attend them because he's always going to say something, and he always gives very considered answers as well. He's an intelligent man who doesn't really have to play a game anymore. He's coming to the end, and like the world is his oyster beyond rugby. If whatever he wants to do with it, he'll have doors open for him because of his status. We just as I said earlier, we have to enjoy him while we still have him from a different, a whole plethora of aspects. He's one of the all-time greats, and we'll miss them. We always miss them when they're gone. We never got, after O'Gara left the stage in 2013, we saw him as a coach and we have a very interesting analyst on our hands, but we never saw the maestro at work in that way. O'Driscoll and all that. These are precious moments, I suppose.
Yeah. So just one big picture question on Leinster this season then. We've spent the last number of years singing their praises week on week, both in Europe and URC, and then they've fallen at the final hurdle. Has much changed here? Do they look every bit as poised to you to go there or thereabouts in Europe, all is well, and it's just a case of almost counting down the months until they're in a European semi-final or final? Well,
you would imagine, I mean, the theory has been that they're not getting tested on a week-to-week basis, so you would imagine the Sharks coming and pilfering a load of their ball and knocking them off at the scrum at times, or knocking them off the ruck in particular, cutting them open, with relative ease from time to time. That's good experience for someone like Rob Russell, who may get pitched in at the end of the season but has never faced attacker Abrahams before and wasn't ready for the picture that presented itself when he just swerved around them as if he wasn't there. So the theory is that these games will be far more valuable to them than, say, playing, beating Zebre by 60 points. And they're European because they didn't win the URC last year. They're in a more difficult European pool because they're playing Racing. So that again is 2 tough games that you will imagine will test them, and that when they come to these end of season games, they will be more used to playing against difficult opposition who ask them more difficult questions. It's taking a toll. Their injury, Farrell was sitting in the stand on Saturday, and beneath them was a whole line of frontline internationals that were either ruled out from previous games or had come off in this game, and we had a couple of fairly serious looking head injuries, and Larmour, as Matt mentioned, but that's what battle hardenance is about in some ways. It's unpalatable, and with 3 concussions in a game was pretty difficult to watch, particularly the Ryan Baird incident. But they are certainly being tested in a way that they haven't been in previous seasons, and whether that will stand to them against La Rochelle or whoever they come up with against in the end. I think Saracens are back this year as well.
Are they back?
Some good teams. I think. Well, they're certainly in the competition, didn't they? Hockey, Leicester Tigers a couple of weeks ago. So there's a couple of good teams around, and they should be better prepared for that when it comes to it. Okay. And they look good enough. They were good enough at times in that European Cup final. They need to manage the last end of games as well, and being in the more games being in the balance over the course of the season, you would imagine, and even Sexton playing alongside these teams will stand to them as it goes on.
Yeah. Just before we wrap up, it's worth mentioning the Wasps situation into administration. I mean, Worcester going to the wall is terrible, obviously, for all concerned. They're not the mammoth name and have the mammoth. They don't have the mammoth pedigree Wasps have. I mean, if this looks as ominous as it seems, it's a massive name to lose from Premiership Rugby. The sense is this is it, is it?
It looks, certainly their game against Exeter at the weekend is off. You know, they could be relegated as a result. You know, there's not teams ready to really come back into the Premiership, you know, from the Championship either. So it's English rugby post-COVID looks like a very, very difficult place to operate. Wasps, I don't know, was it 7-8 years ago they moved to Coventry, and they were, you know, the Ricoh Arena or whatever it's called now was a massive stadium that they thought would, and they own it fully, so they rent the Coventry City. They have a casino in there, they have the darts there, they have concerts there. It's a big revenue generator for them. But whatever way they've spent their money over the last couple of years, it's all it hasn't worked out for them. And yeah, we risk losing. You know, if you think about it, Leo Cullen talked about this recently. Leo Cullen's first European game, they got beaten by a record margin by Wasps, and
remember, yeah.
It was Leinster on the slide, and Wasps were the coming team. And look at them now. You know, Leinster are still flying. I know they're in a different operating environment, and they have the RFU fail safe if they ever go into trouble, and
the taxpayer
and all of it. Yeah, no, it does. It makes a big difference. But the whole model looks a bit dodgy over there, and you wonder whether it's going to open doors potentially for other competitions down the line, or whether, you know, everything's going to go back to the drawing board, because the Premiership as a standalone product, you know, you're losing a big away game as well there. You know, teams are going to miss Wasps coming to town, and broadcasters are going to miss having that brand alongside it, and the European Cup will miss them. I know they're probably not in it this year, but they're a big team and a big name that, you know, when we're talking about them, people will listen. So it's sad. It's another set of players. You know, the Ulster players are kind of scattered to the 4 wins now. Or Wasps going to be the same. Hopefully, someone comes in and saves them, and it gets sorted. But it's not looking good over there.
Okay. Our rugby coverage and Off the Ball is with Vodafone, main sponsor of the Irish rugby team. We all belong to the team of us. Rory O'Connor of the Irish Independent. Thank you, Rory. Cheers.
Thank you.
Wednesday Night Rugby on Off the Ball.
With Vodafone, main sponsor of the Irish rugby team. We all belong to the team of us.